you're a PPL or CPL holder listening to this, then this episode's for you. You might already hold a night rating or be thinking about one, working towards it, or maybe an instrument rating, or planning to start it all soon. At some point in your training, someone's going to tell you that once you're qualified, you're allowed to fly at night, in clouds, whatever. But today I want to challenge that idea. Because being allowed to do something, to fly at night, and being generally ready to fly at night, especially on instruments, if we're going to do it IFR at night, it's not the same thing. I want to discuss all that and more coming right up. So strap in and let's get into it.
Good morning, 7614, IFR Mallow 7 PAB with altitude.
Coordinating, Halen, I'm running bank, talent, bank pressure rolling to 30 degrees. That's 30 degrees there. Simbo star 9000, 1013, KFR 25.
G'day everyone and welcome to episode 195 of the Flight Training Australia podcast. Podcast all about flight training and flying in Australia and beyond. G'day, my name's Trent Robinson, I'm your host. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to be on leave for a couple of weeks. As you're listening to this, I'm already gone. I've going to go head back to Tassie with my wife for a little bit, have a break, and we just loved it so much last time, but missed so much, and it was all rush. So this time we're actually going to stop, slow down, and really enjoy some beautiful sights and sounds. And very much looking forward to that. So unfortunately, that will mean there's going to be a little 2-week break. I apologize. I was going to try and get a episode done for you, but just trying to get this one done will prove to be challenging enough as it is. So I do apologize for that. But the exciting thing is, and after this, we're only about 3 episodes away from the big 200. I'm very much looking forward to bringing that one to you and having a discussion like I normally do every 50 episodes or so with a bunch of students, graduates, pilots, charter pilots, airline pilots, and catch up on where everybody is and what they've been doing from previous episodes and sharing their stories with you. So definitely looking forward to that. I've been doing a fair bit of instrument rating training, a fair bit of Instagram. You would have seen on Instagram, which is really what sort of brought me about the episode topic today. And it really started getting me thinking, and I've been talking to a couple of other WHOs and HOFOs and things and some students doing training elsewhere. And once upon a time, the night VFR really featured heavily in a pilot's training, usually done between the PPL and CPL. Sometimes, you might have to do it after a CPL, but it was usually done before an instrument rating. Now, the beauty of that is you're getting some night hours during your training as you are doing solo hour building, depending on the course structure that you're at. Potentially gave you the chance to go and do some solo command hour building at night as well as command hours. So you're getting a 2-for-1. And also just a good solid foundation for instrument flying later on. Getting familiar with nav aid use, the GPS, just working in a dark cockpit environment, moving on to that instrument rating. I just felt students were more solid and progressed a lot easier from that familiarization than what I'm seeing now. So in aviation now, with course structures and hour requirements, cost requirements and things, the night rating seems to have taken a bit of a sidestep. And the main reason for that, I think, is because most people will tell you, well, an instrument rating lets you fly at night, which is 100% true. The privileges of an instrument rating to fly under the IFR and night VFR at night. And in aviation, we talk about privileges a lot. Privileges of the license, privileges of the rating. PPL gives you privilege to carry passengers. Night rating lets you fly after last light or leave early before first light. And an instrument rating lets you fly in less than VMC conditions and in clouds. But as always, privileges don't necessarily equal proficiency. For many students, night flying is treated as something to get done. And more so now, it's the 1 hour solo at night that you need to get to be able to do the instrument rating training later on. So that could be one whole night and then another night, then solo, or it could all be done in one night potentially, depending on the individual and how quickly they pick it all up. But it is very, very brief. A few circuits, maybe a nav in the instrument rating training, one done at night, but usually that's it. All right, and I get it. Night flying, it can be a bit awkward and comfortable at first, depending on where you do it. It can be very, very bright with city lights. It's hard to get away from the bright lights, not like up here that you only have to really take off on the runway and you're into the dark. But the workload can be higher. Margins for error shrink. Human factors become a lot more relevant, and potentially the first time they've really become significant in a pilot's training. But avoiding night flying or flying at night doesn't make you safer, and it just delays the learning until the stakes are much higher, which is hopefully not when you're out on your own. So why does night flying feel so different, be it night VFR or IFR? Well, let's talk about why night flying, even in VMC, catches so many pilots out sometimes. Obviously, during the day, you're subconsciously using your visual references all the time. There's still the bright of up and the dark of the ground below. The horizon is clear. The terrain, textures, peripheral vision, all of that information, all that movement and sensation is there. Plus, your eyes are able to see it and pick up all your movement sensations and correlate it all. But at night, most of that goes away and becomes potentially unreliable. We have things like black hole approaches, featureless terrain, bright lights that can distort depth perception, illusions that can convince you the aircraft is climbing, turning, or descending when it isn't. For private students or pilots, this is often the first time they've truly had to trust their instruments and go against everything we've told you not to do, which is look outside. For CPL students or pilots, especially those planning to work in GA, night flying is where weak habits get exposed very quickly. If things like your scan isn't disciplined, if your airspeed control is sloppy, or if you rely too heavily on outside cues, night flying and instrument flying will soon highlight this. So the instrument rating trap, something I see far too often. A CPL student completes their instrument rating mostly in daylight. Simulated IMC, using foggles, flying in familiar areas, a few approaches, often the same ones, usually in reasonable weather, and maybe little to no actual IMC, let alone night IFR. On paper, at the end of it all, they're qualified. Legally, they're allowed to do it. But operationally, they've never experienced real workload of night flying, night instrument approaches, and doing it all themselves, and usually far beyond the local flying area, dealing with all the extra things that are having to do with HF radio, OCTA operations, reporting points, etc. Now, don't get me wrong, you can't really help the weather that shows up during an instrument rating. I've got several students with me now that are here for the night flying and the IFR flying in the wet season and have benefited greatly from it. Dry season's not necessarily the best time to be doing an instrument rating up here. Will I do it? Of course I will. But I will mitigate the lack of weather exposure and everything else by use of simulators and night flying instead. CASA does not really differentiate between IFR day and IFR night. I just want to be very clear on that. If you can fly on instruments, supposedly you can do it either way. But the simple fact is that in the dark, things are different. A proper night approach forces you to manage a precise instrument scan, dealing with the human factors associated with aircraft movement, configuration changes, power and energy management. Those changes change pitch attitude, speed, which don't get picked up and detected as easily. You've got looking away for radios and transponders and things, ATC instructions, and then obviously there's fatigue and cognitive load operating at a time where your body isn't used to doing high-level activity functions. All while trying to fly that stable approach with no external visual cue or safety net. Now, that's not something you want to experience for the first time with passengers on board, and obviously that won't happen for the most part because you will be doing ICAS training, and any company worth their salt will ensure that there is adequate night flying and IFR flying done with you. But even I can tell you with the ICAS training that I do up here, sometimes the weather isn't necessarily around to get a good proper assessment of that. And so it's a big decision to make to send someone off IFR qualified where they may come across some weather and have to deal with things the first time. We can't be everywhere at all times. So this needs to be mitigated some way and made sure that maybe when the weather comes, further ICAS training for a flight or two is done to help ensure everyone's safe and comfortable in what they're doing. So why does all this matter for CPL students entering into GA? Well, if you're a CPL student aiming for GA work, charter, remote ops, freight, survey, this matters more. GA aircraft often have limited automation, older avionics, single pilot ops, and far less redundancy. They don't have G1000s. They don't have autopilots. You won't have another pilot monitoring you, not necessarily a flight director helping guide you. It's a lot more manual. Now, obviously, for IFR operations, you have to have an autopilot that works with at least the heading mode and altitude mode. Maybe it does the nav function. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's got an approach mode. Maybe it doesn't. The fact is that night operations and IFR operations in GA are where decision-making and discipline and preparation really count. You haven't got time to flick through URSAs and manual guides and scroll through your iPad looking for information. It needs to be prepped and ready to go. And if your only night exposure was the bare minimum to pass a test, you're starting with a career with a hidden weakness. So it really comes down to training versus being legal. And this is where I want to be really clear for students and pilots listening who are going to embark on this training. Meeting the minimum standard doesn't mean you're well trained, and it doesn't mean you're not well trained either. But minimums exist so licenses can be issued, not so careers can be built safely. Good training should make you uncomfortable in a controlled environment. Real night approaches, real workloads, real pressures, real decision making. Honest conversations about fatigue limits and performance. And if your training avoids all these things because no one wants you to feel uncomfortable or inconvenient, that's a red flag. It's not a kindness. As I've always been saying, as instructors, we need to learn to push without overloading and overwhelming. We need to learn when to back off, but ultimately we need to train for the real world environment and not a bunch of boxes and a syllabus. So if you're a student, what should you be asking for? Here's my advice. Ask for night exposure. Ask for good night approaches. Maybe there's some good places around with some challenging terrain, with some challenging weather. Right? Ask to fly when the workload is higher, not lower. Don't just aim to pass the test. Use the opportunity with your instructors to get as much exposure and as much training as possible in a safe, controlled environment so that when you are out on your own, you can mitigate the risks better and be safer overall. Aim to finish your training knowing where your limits are and respecting them. Because aviation doesn't care what you're allowed to do. It only really cares what you're capable of doing when things don't go to plan. And that's our true test. So whether it's night flying or instrument flying, it's just not an add-on skill. It's not something you smash out. It needs to be done properly and with care. It's often where pilots end up when weather deteriorates, schedules slip, or plans change. The instrument rating is a powerful privilege, but without genuine night proficiency, it can create a false sense of security. So train deeper than the minimum, seek discomfort early, and remember, the goal isn't to be legal, it's to be safe. Right, guys, that is it for this episode. Nice little short one for you. But I really hope this episode sort of resonated with you, and please share it with other students, instructors who need to hear it. And remember, there's no shortcuts. There's only true competency. 61.385, my favorite. Make sure you really understand what it's all about, how it applies to what you're doing, and always seek better training, better exposure, and we'll all be safer for it and not end up in a accident report or giving ourselves a horrible bad scare. All right, that's it for a couple of weeks. Please, there's 195 other episodes, so go back, go listen to some other ones. Maybe there's some you missed. Please share them with your family, friends, other pilots, your examiners, your who's your hofos. And as always, please leave a comment or review on Apple Podcast. I haven't had one for quite a while, so I'd love to see some new comments on there, or of course on Spotify as well. And I will see you all in a couple of weeks. I've got a couple of interviews and episodes already lined up, ready to roll, and I'll record those as soon as I get back. So until then, safe skies, clear nights, and remember the golden rule: aviate and navigate, communicate. Cheers, everyone.